Mom, why are you in my room? What's going on? Alex was startled and confused when he saw his stepmother approaching him. Through the thin nightgown, through the nightlight, his stepmother's firm body at the age of 40 made him feel hot inside. His eyes avoided looking at his mother's body. The summer air in Oregon carried a familiar warmth. But for Alex Carter, the return home for the break didn't bring the comfort it once did. The small town where he had spent most of his childhood now felt like a different world. It had been almost a year since he had last spent more than a weekend at his father's house. And this time, things felt off. The reason stood in the doorway when he arrived, Sarah Carter, his father's wife, his stepmother. "Welcome home, Alex," Sarah greeted with a warm smile, wiping her hands on a dish towel as she stepped forward. Alex forced a nod, lifting his duffel bag over his shoulder. "Yeah. Thanks." She hesitated for a moment, as if expecting more, but he didn't offer anything else. With a quiet sigh, she stepped aside to let him through. The house still smelled the same, a mix of old wood and his father's cologne, but there were small differences everywhere. The furniture had been rearranged. The old family photos had been moved. There were flowers on the dining table, something his father never cared for before. They weren't his mother's flowers. They were Sarah's. His father, Richard Carter, greeted him with a clap on the back. "Good to have you home, kiddo. Hope you don't mind the changes around here." Alex shrugged. "It's fine." But it wasn't. Ever since his father had remarried, Alex had struggled to accept it. His mother had passed away when he was 12, and for years, it had just been him and his dad. The two of them had figured things out together, cooking terrible meals, watching old action movies on Friday nights, fixing things around the house in their own way. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Then, a year ago, Richard had introduced Sarah, and suddenly, things changed. She wasn't a bad person. She wasn't cruel or manipulative. If anything, she tried too hard to be kind, to make space for Alex, to be part of his life. But that was the problem. He hadn't asked for her to be part of his life. And now, he was stuck in this house with her for 3 months. Sarah, to her credit, didn't push him. The first night, she made a homemade dinner, grilled chicken with roasted vegetables, and set the table neatly, even adding a glass of iced tea at Alex's seat. "I remember Richard mentioning you liked iced tea," she said with a hopeful smile. Alex stared at the glass for a second before muttering, "Yeah. Thanks." Dinner was filled with light conversation, mostly between Sarah and his father. She asked about his college classes, about his plans for the summer, but he only answered in short, clipped sentences. After dinner, she tried another approach. "Hey, I know you probably have plans, but if you ever want to, I'm good." Alex cut her off, grabbing his phone. "I'll be out for a bit." Sarah hesitated but nodded. "Okay, have fun." He felt a pang of guilt at her soft response, but he pushed it aside. The next few days followed the same pattern. Sarah would try to include Alex in small things, like offering to go grocery shopping together or watching a movie, but he always refused. Alex kept himself busy, going out with old friends, spending time on his laptop, or pretending to be asleep whenever Sarah was around. Richard, caught in the middle, tried to keep things neutral. "Give her a chance, son," he said one evening. "She's not trying to replace your mother. She just wants to be part of the family." Alex didn't respond. Sarah never forced anything, never demanded that Alex treat her like a mother. But the silence between them spoke louder than words. One morning, when Alex woke up and came downstairs, he found a cup of iced tea on the counter, along with a sticky note. "Made some extra. Hope you have a good day, Sarah." He didn't touch the drink. As the days passed, the small unspoken tensions began to build. Sarah reminded Alex to clean up after himself when he left dishes in the sink, and he barely acknowledged her. She tried to give him space, not pressing him to interact, but that only made things more awkward. His father left for a business trip, meaning for the next week, it would be just Alex and Sarah in the house. "Try not to give Sarah too much trouble while I'm gone," Richard said jokingly as he packed his suitcase. Alex just nodded, but when his father left, the house felt even emptier. For the first time, Alex realized that avoiding Sarah was harder than he thought. Without his father around, she was the only other person in the house. And despite everything, she still tried. That night, as he sat on the couch scrolling through his phone, Sarah walked in and glanced outside. The sky was darkening, heavy clouds rolling in. "Looks like a storm is coming," she said casually. "Do you need a ride if you go out tonight?" Alex shook his head. "I'll be fine." Sarah gave him a small smile. "All right, just be safe." She left him alone after that, disappearing into the kitchen. Alex told himself he didn't care. He told himself it didn't matter if she was kind, if she tried. She wasn't his mother. She would never be. But he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe he was being unfair. That evening, the storm hit hard. Rain lashed against the windows, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Alex checked his phone. A text from a friend saying they'd rescheduled their plans because of the weather. He glanced toward the kitchen, expecting Sarah to be there like always. But the house was silent. Something felt off. He walked to the hallway and saw her keys still on the table. But her car was missing. She hadn't taken her phone. A strange sense of unease crept into Alex's chest. He didn't know where she had gone, but something told him she should have been home by now. For the first time in weeks, he felt something other than indifference toward Sarah. He felt worried. And before he could stop himself, he grabbed his jacket, his keys, and ran out into the storm. The first few days without his father at home were strangely quiet. Alex expected to feel more comfortable with Richard gone, without his father constantly nudging him to be polite. Without those subtle glances encouraging him to give Sarah a chance. Instead, the silence in the house only made him more aware of Sarah's presence. She wasn't intrusive. She didn't demand his attention. But the simple fact that she was there, that she moved through the house as if she belonged, irritated him in ways he couldn't fully explain. Their interactions were minimal, but even in those brief moments, Alex felt the weight of an unspoken tension. At breakfast, Sarah would greet him with a casual, "Good morning, Alex," only to receive a muttered, "Morning," in return. If she asked about his plans for the day, he would answer vaguely, "Just heading out," before grabbing his keys and leaving. When she reminded him to take out the trash, he would nod but never actually do it, forcing her to handle it herself. Sarah never snapped at him, never lectured him the way his father might have. Instead, she would simply sigh, sometimes offering a tired smile before finishing the task herself. And somehow, that quiet patience bothered Alex more than if she had yelled at him. It was as if she was waiting for him to come around. And he hated that expectation. One evening, Sarah made pasta with homemade marinara sauce, setting the table neatly as she always did. Alex came downstairs, hungry, but hesitated when he saw 2 plates set out. "I made enough for both of us," Sarah said, glancing up. "You're welcome to join if you want." Alex considered it for a second. He could smell the garlic and fresh basil. And it did look good, but something in him resisted. He didn't want to accept anything from her. "I'm good," he said instead, turning toward the fridge. Sarah didn't protest as he grabbed a frozen burrito and tossed it into the microwave. She simply nodded, took a bite of her pasta, and continued eating. Alex sat at the counter, pretending not to notice that she still made him a plate anyway, setting it aside in case he changed his mind. He didn't. It was a small, insignificant battle. But to Alex, it felt like a victory. As much as he tried to avoid Sarah, there were moments when her presence was unavoidable. When he stayed up late watching TV, she would quietly come in, refill a glass of water, and leave without a word. When he left his shoes in the hallway, she would simply move them aside rather than scolding him. When she went grocery shopping, she would buy the snacks he liked, even though he never asked. She was always there, quietly taking care of things without asking for anything in return. And the worst part? Alex couldn't ignore the guilt creeping in. One afternoon, he came downstairs and found a plate of freshly baked cookies on the counter, along with a sticky note. "Figured you might like these, Sarah." He stared at the note for a long moment. It wasn't pushy. It wasn't demanding. It was just there, like everything else Sarah did, small, quiet gestures he pretended not to notice. Alex picked up a cookie, hesitated, then took a bite. It was good. But when he heard Sarah coming down the stairs, he quickly put the rest back and walked away, as if caught doing something wrong. Alex wasn't sure what bothered him more, the fact that Sarah was always kind despite his coldness, or the fact that he was starting to feel guilty for how he treated her. But before he had time to think about it, something happened that forced him to face his emotions in a way he never expected. It started with the storm. That evening, the storm hit harder than Alex expected. Rain pounded against the windows, and the wind howled through the trees, making the house feel smaller, quieter. The power flickered once, then steadied. Alex was sitting on the couch, half watching a rerun of some crime show, when he glanced at the clock. 9:30 p.m. Sarah still wasn't home. At first, he ignored the thought. Maybe she was just running errands. Or maybe she had gone to visit a friend. It wasn't like he kept track of her schedule. But then, as he got up to grab a drink from the kitchen, something stopped him cold. Sarah's keys were still on the counter. And so was her phone. A strange, uneasy feeling settled in Alex's stomach. She wouldn't have gone far without them. He checked the garage. Her car was gone. His heartbeat quickened. Had she gone out before the storm got bad? Had she gotten caught in the rain? For the first time, Alex realized that he had no idea where she had gone or when she had left. He hadn't been paying attention. He never paid attention. He tried to tell himself it wasn't a big deal. Maybe she was fine. Maybe she had taken the car somewhere nearby and was just waiting out the storm. But the longer he stood there, staring at the empty garage, the harder it became to ignore the tightness in his chest. He grabbed his jacket and car keys, pulling them on in one hurried motion. He wasn't sure where to look, but he couldn't just sit here. He had to find her. The moment Alex stepped outside, the rain hit him like a wall. The wind was brutal, making the trees sway dangerously. Thunder rumbled in the distance, shaking the ground. He climbed into his car, hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Where would she have gone? His first guess was the grocery store, but when he pulled into the parking lot, the place was dark, already closed. Next, he checked the main road leading into town. Nothing. His worry deepened. Then, just as he was about to turn around, his headlights caught something on the side of the road, a small figure standing next to a car, partially hidden by the heavy rain. His stomach dropped. It was Sarah. Alex pulled over quickly, not even bothering to turn off the engine. Sarah stood beside her car, rain dripping from her soaked hair, her hands gripping the useless umbrella she had probably abandoned the moment the wind turned against her. She was struggling to restart the car, her fingers trembling from the cold. Alex jumped out and ran toward her. Sarah. She looked up, surprised. Alex? His heart twisted at the sight of her, completely drenched, shivering, her blouse clinging to her skin from the downpour. She had clearly been standing there for a long time. What the hell are you doing out here? He demanded, his voice sharper than he intended. Sarah let out a breathless laugh, half relieved, half exhausted. My car died. I was hoping someone would stop. But, no luck. Alex ran a hand through his already soaked hair, frustration mixing with something he didn't want to name. Guilt. He should have noticed sooner. Get in my car, he said, shaking his head. Come on, you're gonna get sick. Sarah didn't argue. She was too cold, too tired. The ride home was quiet, except for the rain pounding on the windshield. Alex turned the heat on full blast without a word. He glanced at her occasionally, her arms wrapped around herself for warmth. Her hair dripping onto the seat, her face pale. She looked small, vulnerable. For the first time, Alex realized that Sarah wasn't just his father's wife. She was a person who got stranded in the rain, who looked exhausted, who had no one else looking for her except him. And that thought unnerved him. When they finally pulled into the driveway, Sarah exhaled deeply. Thank you, Alex, she murmured. Alex just nodded stiffly. He wasn't sure how to respond. As soon as they stepped inside, Sarah hugged her arms tighter around herself, visibly shaking from the cold. You should go take a hot shower, Alex said, feeling strangely awkward. Sarah hesitated but then gave him a small, tired smile. Yeah, I think I will. She disappeared upstairs. Alex stood in the living room for a long moment, listening to the rain still hammering against the roof. Then, before he could overthink it, he walked into the kitchen, grabbed a mug, and started making tea. He didn't even like tea. But Sarah did. And for the first time in weeks, Alex realized that he wanted to do something for her, not out of obligation. Not because his father would want him to, but because he actually cared. He set the tea on the counter, not leaving a note this time, just leaving it there for her to find. And when Sarah came down later, her eyes softened when she saw it. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Because something between them had shifted. The next morning, the house was silent. Alex woke up late, still feeling the weight of last night's storm in his body. His clothes were dry now, but the memory of Sarah standing in the rain, shivering beside her broken-down car, still lingered in his mind. He pulled on a hoodie and headed downstairs, expecting to find her in the kitchen, like always. But the kitchen was empty. For a moment, he frowned. Had she overslept? That wasn't like her. Sarah was always the first one up, moving around, making breakfast, drinking her tea. Then, he noticed something odd. The tea he had left for her last night was still untouched. A strange sense of unease crept into his chest. Without thinking, Alex walked to the hallway and stopped in front of Sarah's bedroom door. He hesitated, then knocked lightly. No response. He knocked again. Sarah? Still nothing. Something in his gut told him something was wrong, ignoring the part of his brain that told him he was overreacting. He slowly turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. Sarah was lying in bed, her face pale, her hair slightly damp from sweat instead of rain this time. She stirred slightly at the sound of the door opening but didn't wake up. Alex stepped closer, frowning. Sarah? Her eyelids fluttered, and she let out a weak, hoarse whisper. Alex? You're sick. He stated the obvious, feeling a strange knot in his stomach. Sarah attempted to sit up but immediately winced, pressing a hand to her forehead. I think I might have a fever. No kidding. Alex glanced around the room, his mind working fast. What the hell was he supposed to do? For a second, he thought about calling his dad. But then he hesitated. Would Richard even be able to come back in time? His gaze flickered back to Sarah. Her breathing was slow, her body curled slightly as if she was trying to shield herself from the discomfort. She needed help now. Alex exhaled sharply and made a decision. I'll be back, he muttered. Sarah gave a small nod, too exhausted to respond properly. Alex wasn't exactly a caretaker. But for the first time, he felt a sense of responsibility, not because his dad would expect him to help, but because he genuinely wanted to. He found medicine in the bathroom cabinet and brought it to her. He grabbed a glass of water and set it on the nightstand. He Googled how to check a fever and realized he needed a thermometer. After some searching, he found one and awkwardly handed it to her. Sarah took the thermometer, her hands shaking slightly. After a minute, it beeped, 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Alex cursed under his breath. That was high. You should probably eat something, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I can make something. Sarah let out a small, tired laugh. You cook? Not really, he sighed. But I can figure it out. Sarah just smiled weakly. All right. Alex wasn't sure why making food felt so important. Maybe because every time Sarah cooked for him, he had ignored it. Maybe because this was the first thing he could do for her that wasn't just an obligation. He went to the kitchen, pulled out ingredients for oatmeal, and stared at them for a solid minute before reluctantly pulling up a recipe on his phone. His first attempt? A disaster. The second attempt? Slightly less terrible. By the time he was done, he had managed to make a bowl of oatmeal with honey and cinnamon. It wasn't gourmet, but it smelled decent. When he walked back upstairs and set the tray down beside Sarah, she looked at him with genuine surprise. You actually did it, she murmured, blinking up at him. Don't sound so shocked. Alex rolled his eyes, crossing his arms. I'm not completely useless. Sarah chuckled, her voice still weak but lighter than before. I never thought you were useless. Alex didn't have a response to that. Sarah took a small spoonful of the oatmeal and hummed in approval. This is actually good. Alex raised an eyebrow. You sure you're not just saying that because I went through all that effort? Sarah smiled softly. Maybe a little. Silence settled between them, not the awkward kind they used to have, but something different. Alex sat on the edge of the bed, watching as Sarah slowly ate. For the first time, he realized just how much effort she had been making all along. She had never forced him to accept her. She had never tried to replace his mother. She just wanted to be there. And for the first time, Alex wasn't sure why he had resisted so much. As Sarah set the empty bowl aside, she let out a deep sigh. Thank you, Alex. Really? He shrugged, pretending not to care. Yeah, well, if you get worse, I'm calling Dad. Sarah smiled. Fair enough. Alex stood up, stretching. You should get some rest. She nodded, already looking exhausted again. As Alex walked out of the room, he paused in the doorway. For a second, he considered saying something else, acknowledging that he cared, that he had been unfair, that maybe she wasn't so bad. But he wasn't ready for that yet. So instead, he just said, I'll check on you later. Sarah looked at him, understanding exactly what he meant, even if he didn't say it outright. And for the first time, the space between them didn't feel so distant anymore. The next day, Sarah was still weak but better. Alex had checked on her a few times, though he had made sure not to be obvious about it. He would casually knock on her door, pretending he just happened to pass by, and mutter, "You need anything?" before walking away too fast to let her answer properly. But every time he did, Sarah smiled a little, as if she understood what he wasn't saying out loud. That afternoon, he brought her another cup of tea, placing it on her nightstand without a word. Sarah looked at the cup, then at him. You really don't like tea, do you? Alex blinked. What? She chuckled softly. I've noticed. You never drink it, but you keep making it for me. He shifted uncomfortably. I mean, you like it. Sarah tilted her head slightly, studying him. That's kind of you, Alex. He scoffed. Yeah, well, don't get used to it. But the way Sarah smiled told him she already had. Later that evening, Sarah came downstairs for the first time since she had fallen sick. She moved slowly, still recovering, but she insisted on making herself dinner. Alex, watching her fumble with the stove, sighed and stepped in. All right, move, he muttered, nudging her aside. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Oh? The new chef of the house? Just sit down before you pass out. He didn't meet her eyes as he pulled out the ingredients. I'll cook. Sarah obeyed, sitting at the kitchen counter, her expression amused yet soft. I never thought I'd see the day. Alex shrugged, pretending he wasn't embarrassed by how easily he had taken over. As he worked, Sarah spoke again. You know, you remind me a lot of your dad when I first met him. Alex frowned. How? Sarah smiled. Stubborn, closed off. Took forever to admit he actually cared. Alex snorted. Sounds about right. Sarah hesitated before adding, I wasn't sure if you'd ever let me in. He paused for a second, his grip tightening on the spatula. Then, before he could stop himself, he muttered, I wasn't sure either. Sarah looked at him, not surprised, not offended, just understanding. And for the first time, Alex realized he didn't mind that. After dinner, they moved to the living room, the house filled with an unusual sense of calm. For once, Alex didn't reach for his phone. Neither of them felt the need to break the quiet. Then, after a long moment, Sarah spoke softly. You don't talk about her much. Alex didn't need to ask who she meant. His throat tightened. No, I don't. Sarah nodded, not pushing. I can understand why. Alex stared at his hands. It had been years since he really let himself think about his mother. When his father remarried, he had buried those memories deeper, not because he wanted to forget her, but because he didn't want to replace her. Sarah's voice was gentle. She must have been an amazing woman. Alex let out a breath. She was. It surprised him how easy it was to say that. How it didn't feel like a betrayal. She used to hum when she cooked. He found himself saying, she wasn't even good at it, but she always said food tasted better with a little music. Sarah smiled softly. I like that. Alex swallowed, feeling his chest tighten. I think, I was scared that if I got used to you being here, it meant I was forgetting her. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, "You don't have to forget someone to make space for someone else." He looked at her. And for the first time, he believed her. That night, as Alex went to bed, he hesitated before closing his door. Instead of shutting it all the way, like he usually did, he left it slightly open. A small thing. But Sarah noticed. She didn't say anything. She just smiled. Because she knew, it was a step forward. And for now, that was enough. For the first time since Alex had come home for the summer, the house felt different. Not physically, everything still looked the same. The furniture hadn't moved. The framed photos on the wall were unchanged. But something between him and Sarah had shifted. It wasn't dramatic. They didn't suddenly act like a perfect family. But there was a new quiet understanding in the way they interacted. And Alex? He found himself changing without even realizing it. It started with small things. When Sarah asked him to take out the trash, he actually did it without rolling his eyes. When she made dinner, he sat at the table instead of grabbing food and disappearing upstairs. If she asked about his day, he gave more than one-word answers. He still wasn't sure why he was making an effort. Maybe because she had been sick and vulnerable, and he had seen a side of her that made it harder to be distant. Or maybe because, for the first time, he didn't see her as an outsider anymore. A week after she had recovered, Alex came downstairs to find Sarah watching TV with a blanket draped over her legs. He usually ignored whatever she was watching, but this time, as he walked past, she glanced up. "Ever seen this show before?" she asked, gesturing toward the screen. Alex hesitated. He had. It was one of those true crime series, the kind he usually watched alone. Instead of giving his usual non-committal shrug, he surprised himself by saying, "Yeah, it's decent." Sarah smiled. "It's my guilty pleasure." Alex lingered for a second. Then, before he could change his mind, he sat down at the other end of the couch. Sarah didn't say anything, she just handed him the remote. And just like that, watching TV together became part of their routine. A few nights later, Sarah came home late from running errands. Alex, who had been mindlessly scrolling through his phone in the living room, heard the door creak open and glanced up. Sarah looked exhausted. Without thinking, Alex said, "Did you eat yet?" Sarah blinked at him. "Oh. No, not yet." There was a pause. Then, before he could talk himself out of it, Alex stood up and walked toward the kitchen. Sarah tilted her head. "What are you doing?" "I dunno." He opened the fridge. "Figured I'd make something. You want eggs or?" Sarah just stared at him for a moment, then laughed softly. "Eggs sound great." Alex didn't look at her, but he felt the warmth of her smile like a quiet victory. And as he cracked the eggs into the pan, he realized something. It felt normal. Like a real family. The eggs sizzled in the pan as Alex absent-mindedly stirred them with a spatula. Sarah sat at the kitchen counter, watching him with a small, amused smile. "I never thought I'd see the day," she teased lightly. Alex scoffed. "It's just eggs." Sarah chuckled. "Still, it's nice." He didn't respond, but something about her words settled in his chest in a way he couldn't quite explain. As they sat down to eat, the kitchen felt warmer than usual. Not just because of the food, but because the silence between them no longer felt awkward. For once, Alex didn't rush through his meal. He took his time, letting himself relax. Sarah broke the quiet. "You know, when I first married your dad, I wasn't sure how to fit into your life." Alex paused, his fork hovering over his plate. She had never talked about this before. Sarah gave him a small, thoughtful smile. "I didn't want to replace your mom. I knew that was impossible. But I hoped, at some point, we could at least be something to each other." Alex swallowed. He had always assumed she wanted to take his mother's place. But hearing her say it out loud, that she never intended to, it made something in him unclench. After a long moment, he muttered, "I guess I didn't make it easy for you." Sarah shook her head, but not in frustration. "I understood why." Alex hesitated, then said something he had never admitted before. "I think, I was scared that letting you in meant losing her." Sarah's expression softened. "You don't have to choose, Alex." Her voice was gentle. "You can miss her and still make room for other people who care about you." Alex looked down at his plate. His appetite suddenly gone. For years, he had been holding onto the idea that accepting Sarah meant betraying his mother's memory. But sitting here, in this moment, he realized his mom would have wanted him to be happy. And maybe, just maybe, he had been pushing away someone who genuinely cared about him for no reason at all. They finished eating in a comfortable silence. When Sarah stood up to take her plate to the sink, Alex surprised himself by saying, "I got it." She blinked. "Are you sure?" He rolled his eyes. "It's just dishes. Relax." Sarah smiled, then sat back down, watching as he rinsed off their plates. It was such a normal, simple thing. But for them, it meant everything. Because for the first time, they weren't just two people living in the same house. They were family. A week passed, and for the first time since he arrived home for the summer, Alex felt at ease. The tension that had once lingered between him and Sarah was gone, replaced by something unspoken but real. He still wasn't the type to openly express affection, but he no longer went out of his way to avoid her. If she made dinner, he helped set the table. If she asked how his day was, he actually answered. And sometimes, even when she didn't ask, he'd check in on her. It wasn't forced. It wasn't awkward. It was natural. Until one phone call changed everything. It was a Sunday evening when Alex's father, Richard, called from out of town. Sarah had put the call on speaker while she prepared dinner, allowing Alex to hear as he sat at the kitchen counter. "How's everything going over there?" Richard asked, his voice crackling slightly through the speaker. Sarah smiled, stirring a pot of soup. "Everything's fine. We miss you, though." Richard chuckled. "Miss you too. How's Alex? Still giving you trouble?" Alex rolled his eyes. "I'm right here, Dad." Sarah laughed, but before she could respond, Richard continued, his tone lighthearted. "Well, I hope he hasn't burned the house down yet. I know you've been playing mom while I'm gone." The words were meant as a joke. But the second they left Richard's mouth, Alex stiffened. The atmosphere in the kitchen shifted, just slightly, but noticeably. Sarah's smile faltered for half a second before she quickly recovered. "I wouldn't say that." But Alex wasn't listening anymore. He wasn't angry at his father. Not really. But something about the way Richard had said it, playing mom, made his stomach twist. Because no matter how much progress he and Sarah had made, no matter how much he had grown to care for her, she wasn't his mom. She never would be. And for some reason, that realization stung in a way it hadn't before. Sarah must have noticed his sudden silence, because after she ended the call, she glanced at him. "You okay?" she asked gently. Alex didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure how to explain what he was feeling. Finally, he exhaled, pushing his chair back. "I'm gonna go for a drive." Sarah frowned but didn't push. "Be careful." He nodded and walked out the door. But the heaviness in his chest stayed with him. To be continued in part 2.